Welcome to our 2026 Severe Weather Outlook. Today we are going to dive into all the different modes of severe weather and impactful weather that we can see in East Tennessee on any given day at any time of the year. Meteorologist Cassie Nall join me. Cassie, we're going to take a deep dive into all what makes a thunderstorm severe, all the different impactful weather, our whole weather team. We're going to be talking about ways to keep you safe when severe weather strikes.
And that's why we're doing this today, because we really want people to be prepared, understand the different types of weather that we can see here in East Tennessee if you're not maybe familiar with the area, or just kind of maybe remind everyone that the weather can be pretty impactful in our part of the country.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a great format. We love being in our podcast center. You know, we can take plenty of time to talk about these. So thank you for joining us. And let's start that deep dive. You know, before we get into what makes a storm severe, there's a lot of other types of impactful weather, not necessarily labeled severe, but something we can see a good bit of, and that starts with flooding, doesn't it?
That's right. Damaging wind, hail, tornadoes, they aren't the only types of impactful weather that we can see here. And flooding is actually second only to heat when it comes to weather-related fatalities in the country. So it's something that can happen anywhere, any time of year.
Right.
And that's why meteorologist Rebecca Sweet is going to show us what you need to know before the heavy rain arrives and how you can react if there is flooding in your area.
Today we're talking about a subject that can happen at any time of the year, and it is flooding. Doesn't necessarily have to happen within severe thunderstorms, but let's talk about some of the ways that you can be prepared ahead of time during the flood and what to do after the flood. So first and foremost, ahead of time, let's talk about the preparation that goes into flooding. So we have different ways of kind of taking action ahead of time. We have an advisory. This is when we want to remind you to be aware that flooding could be possible. So a flood advisory is something that can easily come up with some heavier downpours. A flood watch is when we also want you to be prepared, but this is going to cover perhaps more of a larger area when it comes to heavy rain that could be moving into the area, causing flooding to develop. Now, when you hear a warning means we want you to take action, that flooding is happening in a certain area. And that's when we need you to make sure that you are taking the action, make sure that you are staying off the roads and continuing to find some higher ground. Now, there's different types of flooding. You may not know this actually. We have aerial flooding, which is the most common. It usually develops gradually from persistent rain, standing water in low-lying or poor drainage areas. So we typically do see aerial flooding sometimes with some of those heavier downpours or long-lasting showers that move into the area. Flash flooding, sometimes the most dangerous. Now, this develops rapidly after heavy rainfall. It brings in rain that can cause torrential damage in some areas. So flash flooding, if you hear that there's a flash flood warning in place, this is when you need to make sure that you are taking that immediate action because flooding is happening. And then we also have river flooding, which is going to be the most long lasting. So river flooding again develops from excessive runoff, and this can persist really for a long period of time even after the rain comes to an end. So those are the different types of flooding that we have in place. So with the concern for flash flooding, remember this is kind of the one that's a little bit more on the concerning side. So what to do when you have any type of flooding, but in particular flash flooding. So we want to make sure that you're listening to your TV, your radio stations, your weather radio, and be prepared for the warnings and the information that's coming into your device. Be prepared to potentially evacuate at a moment's notice, and this is where we want to remind you to head for higher ground. Be extra cautious at night because at night you really just can't tell where this standing water is going to be in place. So that's where we always say again, especially at night, please do not drive. We always remind folks if you see a flooded roadway, turn around, don't drown, and that is especially going to be something early in the morning and late at night. But a flash flood warning, I mean, this goes into the same concern as like a severe thunderstorm warning where we're saying take action. So let's say we have a really bad scenario where we do get some catastrophic flooding, and that has happened here across the southeast. So what you want to do is you want to get to the highest level of your house. If you have to, get on the roof, call 911. You want to make sure that you move to the higher floor with windows. Windows are going to be key here, and make sure you bring with your phone and your supplies. So again, try and go to the highest level of your house. Now, what you do want to avoid is to not go into an attic area where perhaps you don't have any windows in place. If you get into this and you do see some catastrophic flooding, this is where you're going to have the potential of perhaps getting stuck. So you want to avoid that. So think windows and think the highest level. It's the exact opposite of what you would think of when you're trying to take shelter from a tornado. So you want to get high and you want to have windows. Do not attempt, again, I'm going to repeat this multiple times, to drive in flooded roadways. That's where it's going to lead into some rough conditions. So after the flood, this is after the fact, what can you do? Well, we want you to make sure that you stay informed. Follow along with your news outlets. Know where we are seeing some of those concerning spots. Make sure that your water is safe to drink. A lot of times after flooding takes place, the water can get contaminated. So you do want to make sure that you have safe water, bottled water. There may be an enforcement of saying boiling water might be necessary. So again, listen to local authorities when it comes to the safety of drinking water. Avoid floodwaters. There's going to be debris, possible chemicals that are in there, pollution. So you just want to try to stay out of those flooded waters. Avoid disaster areas, and of course, contact loved ones. These are kind of the steps that you want to take. Maybe contact your insurance agency as well if you do have any flooding concerns that take place in your house, so that way you know all the right steps. And of course, wait for the all clear. In some situations, this could take a really long time, especially after some catastrophic flooding. So again, follow us for updates as we head throughout the rest of the week. This was just a little taste of what to do when it comes to flooding. We'll have much more on severe weather and what you can expect here across East Tennessee and the Southeast coming up.
So that covers flooding. Boy, Becca did a great job going to all the details of flooding, what to do, and ways to keep safe. So thank you, Becca, for that. And now we're moving on to lightning. Is that right, Cass?
Yes. So when we talk about the possibility of thunderstorms in our area, it's important to remember that every storm is actually dangerous because it contains lightning.
Lightning, right.
And so that's what folks need to know.
Yeah.
When thunder roars, you got to head indoors. And meteorologist Mike Simon shares some really interesting facts and also safety tips for what to do if you're caught outside during a storm, and also how to stay safe in your home during a thunderstorm.
We have all witnessed its magnificence and we heard its roar. We're talking about lightning. Now, when thunder roars, head indoors. I'm sure you may have heard that. That's some very good advice. A lightning bolt is only about 1 inch thick. Now, it seems a lot larger, but it's so bright and so hot. As a matter of fact, it's 60,000 degrees Fahrenheit. That's about 5 times hotter than the surface of the sun. It may have 1 million to as much as 1 billion volts of electricity. That's very powerful. 8 million strikes happen each day on this planet alone. Well, many people have been outside during lightning strikes and they have lost their lives because of it. In the water, bad idea. Under a tree, very bad idea. 92 people lost their lives doing that. Outside in the open or in the yard, over 40 deaths for each of those occurrences. And some people even died on the roof. They've died inside the house. So there are tips if you're outside or inside. You should heed caution when there's a lightning storm nearby. Run to a building or a vehicle if caught outside. Avoid any open fields. You don't want to be the path of least resistance for a lightning strike. Stay away from trees and utility poles. Keep away from any water. You saw how many people lost their lives being in the water. Well, you can determine how far that lightning strike is away from you by listening to the thunder. And once you hear the thunder, if you've counted, each second will tell you how far away it is. 5 seconds is up to 1 mile away. So if you got 10 seconds before you hear the thunder, you know it's 2 miles away, and that's still not safe. Now, it can vary the sound depending on the temperature of the air. It moves faster in higher temperatures than in slower temperatures. Well, the thunder can go even further away, but eventually it dissipates and you don't hear it at all. A lot of people refer to it as heat lightning. No such thing. There's still thunder, yet it's too far away since that sound dissipates. Now, if you're indoors, you got to pay attention to some safety too. Do not touch anything plugged into an outlet, good conductor of electricity. Stay away from any windows. Be sure those windows are closed. And don't shower, bathe, or wash dishes, which means you don't want to be in or near any water. Now, once you cannot hear that thunder for 30 minutes, it's safe now to go about your activity. I'm meteorologist Mike Simon for 10 News.
Some really interesting information from Mike there, and two things that stuck out to me were, because growing up in the South,
right,
heat lightning.
heat lightning.
My grandmother always was like, see that over there? That's heat lightning. That's because it's warm outside and lightning just happens. As a scientist now, I understand that is not the case.
No such thing. Share with your family, friends, and neighbors. Matter of fact, you will impress them. You make it an argument because a lot of folks grew up with that. Typically happens in the summertime.
Yes. I totally understand the association.
Yeah, exactly. No such thing. It's a thunderstorm too far away to hear the thunder. Light travels much faster than sound. So you see the light, they reach your eyes. You're waiting to hear. You know lightning comes first. Lightning causes thunder, but you never hear the thunder. So people say, well, I guess that's just heat lightning because it's hot outside.
Yep. And we all heard it growing up, so it continues. It just continues.
Yeah.
Also, something else he mentioned was the whole 5 seconds to 1 mile.
Ah, yes.
Because also I grew up doing 1 Mississippi, 1 mile.
Same. Raise my hand.
Yeah.
Same. I think a lot of folks, viewers watching right now, it's like, yeah, I thought the same thing. Maybe there was some false teaching, but no, seriously, I think it was just easier to remember that way. No, technically, you get to 5 seconds, 4.99, something, whatever, but it's 1 mile.
It's a lot closer than you think it is.
It's a lot closer than you think it is.
Yeah.
So that hits home the fact that Mike did that very well, talking about the safety tips. You know, when thunder roars, move indoors. When you see lightning or hear thunder, you've got to go ahead and move indoors right away.
And so that's why we say if you're close enough to hear the thunder, you're close enough to be struck by the lightning.
Yes.
Now, usually, you're obviously going to see the lightning first. So, you know, don't wait for that. But that's why we say when thunder roars, head indoors, or if it's at nighttime, you see a flash, make a dash inside as well.
There's a new one.
Yeah, whatever gets people to remember.
I like that. That's very good, Cass.
So we've talked about flooding and we've talked about lightning.
Right.
Those are actually two things that are not necessarily criteria for a severe storm.
Right.
And I put that in quotes because a severe storm is a very technical term.
Right.
And only certain storms meet that criteria.
Exactly. There are byproducts. These are byproducts
of strong storms.
Strong storms, you know, severe storms. So yeah. So let's talk about what makes a thunderstorm severe. Two main criteria: wind and hail, and also a severe storm can produce a tornado. Obviously, that would make it severe. But when we're talking about what makes a thunderstorm severe, the damaging winds of 58 miles per hour or greater. So that's one of the main criteria. So now, in talking with kids a lot of times, so if you have 55 mile per hour winds, is it okay to go out and play outside? Obviously, no. Yeah. It's just a criteria, right? That threshold. But once you get to 58 mile per hour or greater winds, that's where damage can be produced, and you can have wind damage, power outages, et cetera. The other main criteria, go ahead, Cass, yeah.
Well, I was going to say, obviously, this is an estimate with the National Weather Service.
Right.
When they see a storm has the potential to produce 58 mile per hour winds, even maybe 55 mile per hour winds, they're going to go ahead and issue that warning.
Yes.
But that's what the difference is between the warning versus a special weather statement. You can have a severe storm or a storm, I should say, come through and produce 50 mile per hour winds, and there may not be a warning associated with it.
Right.
Because technically it didn't meet the criteria.
That's good. Exactly.
But it is impactful, and it could still cause damage. And so that's why it's kind of tricky. Every storm that comes through, we need folks to be prepared for. Right. And you really need to take those warnings seriously.
You need to take them seriously. That's the first, a lot of times that's the first phase. You'll see that tan or brown box on our mapping. That's a special statement, a significant weather advisory for a strong storm below severe levels, probably 40, maybe 50 mile per hour winds, and maybe small hail, not quite to the severe storm criteria. The other thing, we say 58 miles per hour greater, they round it up. So you'll always see it'll say 60 mile per hour. So they just go ahead and round it up. But it's a technicality. So great point, Cass, about some even lesser than severe winds can still do damage. Hail. Okay, I've got my coin here, and I'll try to hold it up so folks see. So what makes a thunderstorm severe? A quarter size hailstone or larger is considered severe. Used to be dime or penny. They skipped over nickel. That's just for discussion for another day. But it's 1 inch diameter, a quarter or larger. And we like for folks, if you have a hailstone, if you put that coin, it could be any coin, and this is a quarter, this is considered severe, in your hand with the hailstone, it helps us to compare and get a better estimate because everybody's hand size is different.
Right.
Coin
people send us
is
a
universal.
picture. People send us a picture of a hailstone in their hands.
Right.
And
Yes.
like my hand is much smaller than your hand. So that hailstone is going to look massive if I'm holding it versus if you're holding it, it's not going to look quite like that. And
Yeah,
and
it leaves
that's
us guessing like, well, I don't know. What do you think, Cass? I think that's, M&M size. No, I don't know.
Oh, and that's another thing. Marbles. Come in all kinds of sizes. So when people tell us they've got marble size hail,
Yes.
that can vary dramatically. And the same thing you just said, M&Ms.
Yeah.
Is it a classic M&M?
Yeah.
Is it a peanut butter stuffed M&M? Does it have a pretzel in it? I mean, M&Ms also vary in size. So we got to stick to the more
I remember
standard.
a Christmas treat. This had a big Yeah.
Yeah, so stick to the more standard objects like coins, or if we get even larger than that, which we're going to talk about a little bit later,
Yes.
maybe a baseball or a softball, or Mike mentions even a volleyball.
We'll talk about that a little bit. I got my hail box, H-A-I-L, but yeah, all different sizes of hail that can be very impactful.
Yes, your accent does make us question sometimes what is coming from the sky.
Exactly.
With hail.
Yeah.
But we're going to talk more about that.
We'll get into that
coming
a
up
little
in
bit
just a
later.
little bit. So first, let's talk about the setup coming into this year's spring severe weather season.
Right.
Because every year is obviously different.
Yeah.
And that's the key factor here is that everybody's experience has also been very different from year to year when we've talked about severe weather across the area. So we can only share details about individual severe weather events as we're coming up to them just a few days in advance, but we can look at the big picture to kind of get a vibe on how the overall season may shape up. So I sat down and talked with someone from the National Weather Service about this. I think most folks have heard at this point about ENSO.
ENSO, yeah.
El Nino, La Nina, or neutral conditions.
Oh boy, there's some terms. Is La Nina El Nino's sister? No, we joke. But yeah, they mean something specifically.
Yes.
A large scale pattern.
Yes, it's either warming or cooling of the eastern Pacific equatorial waters.
Right. Well said, by the way.
Thank you. I've practiced that a lot. So to make sure that I said that correctly.
Yes.
But even though those waters are in the Pacific Ocean, they can affect the weather patterns across the United States.
Right.
Now, these patterns are felt most strongly during the winter season, but also into the spring season. And this year, we're going from a La Nina into a neutral pattern.
Okay.
So we're kind of transitioning.
Yeah, we're transitioning out.
Yes. So I spoke to Brandon Wasilewski with the National Weather Service in Morristown about what this could mean for the weather in East Tennessee.
Well, kind of as the phases suggest, I mean, once we move out of the La Nina phase and then into the neutral phase, that means that we're going to be seeing less of the effects of ENSO, which basically means we can have a lot more variability because there's other patterns that we can see that can take shape and take precedent over ENSO, especially in our area where, overall the effects of it are not felt as strongly as in some other areas like further north or closer to the Gulf and some of those places. So definitely some more variability is what we can see.
So he was talking about how because we're transitioning from La Nina into neutral, we can have more variability, which adds a little bit more uncertainty to it.
Right.
Now, this year's strength of La Nina is actually very similar to last winter's La Nina.
Yeah, they were, I won't say identical, but very similar.
They're very similar, but what we have seen throughout the winter season has been very different than what we ended up having last year. So as an example to what Brandon was mentioning with the patterns having an influence on our weather, last February in 2025, we started off one of the warmest on record last year. And in fact, that early season warmth, that spring-like warmth that we had, we actually ended up having severe weather very early that year. On February 6th, we had 2 tornadoes.
Right.
One in Morgan County that did unfortunately kill 2 people. And then we had one in Granger County. And that was so unusual. In fact, for both of those counties, those tornadoes were the first on record in the month of February.
The earliest. Wow.
Yeah.
So that warmth preceded and basically was a precursor to severe weather that developed shortly after.
Yeah, it gave us the ingredients that were in place much earlier than we typically have severe weather, and especially tornadoes last year.
Right.
Obviously, this February has been very different, much cooler. We've had some brief little warm spells here and there.
Yep, some faux springs.
Some faux springs, some springs of deception.
Yes.
But overall, we have been cooler than average this month, and because of that, we've been much more stable, and we haven't had any severe weather, although we have had some strong winds.
Now, Cass, that's a great point. The two go together. Before you see severe weather, ingredients, as you said very well. You got to have the warm, moist atmosphere. So know ahead of time when we start transitioning to that different air mass, that's when we typically see our most active weather.
And that's something that we, as meteorologists, also look at.
Right.
When we're like, ooh, yay, sunny and 75, it feels good. We're like,
Yeah.
when is the next system coming? Because like you like to say, that's the flag.
That's the flag in the atmosphere waving. Exactly. Sometimes ooh, dew points are rising. They could lead to
watch
those storms. Exactly.
Yep. Now, Brandon also mentioned some analog years.
Right.
So when we're looking at big picture patterns
Right.
and long range outlooks, we try
Right.
to find years that have very similar setups
Right.
coming in. Obviously, last year, even with the La Nina being the same, we had very different winter seasons, December, January, and February. So he found that 2023,
Right.
2018, 2009, and 2006 had a similar setup to how things are expected to evolve this year. Because last year, even though our La Nina was similar, we didn't actually transition to neutral.
Right.
This year we are.
Okay.
So 3 of those 4 years that I mentioned ended up having above average severe weather seasons.
Okay.
They were more active. An average year has about 3 to 4 tornadoes in East Tennessee. 2023 had 12.
Okay.
So we had about 3 to 4 times an
Right.
average number there. 2009 had 22 tornadoes that year, and that was the 3rd most on record in a single year.
Wow.
Now, to be fair, 2018 was about average when it came to that. So,
Okay.
so when we're talking about these analog years, 3 of the 4,
Right.
oh my goodness, pay attention.
Yes.
But 1 of them ended up being average.
Right.
And the caveat to all of this, ENSO is not the only
Right.
influencing factor that we have in
Right.
what kind of weather we have here in East Tennessee. There are many other short-term and smaller scale setups that can determine how frequently we have severe weather
Yeah.
events.
That is great info, though. Those analog years, it helps us, as you said, we can look back and it's not a slam dunk. It's not, this is exactly what happened, but it gives us a good idea. It's a clue of what may play out. So that's one of the many tools we used in forecasting and trying to help folks stay prepared for upcoming potential severe weather.
So to kind of summarize that conversation that I had with him, higher than normal variability from year to year. So like you said, not a slam dunk when it comes to it. But also when you said what may happen, last May was very, very busy when it came to severe weather.
Yes.
And what we're going to talk about a little bit later in this is when we typically have more active weather, this transition from a La Nina into a neutral can actually kind of delay the onset of that severe weather into some later months too. So we'll talk about that more in detail coming up too.
You know, some potentially later spring and everything. Quick note, I remember April last year, our youngest son got married in West Tennessee.
Oh yeah.
Oh my goodness. Had tornado warnings and sirens going on in Jackson, Tennessee, April 5th. So that time of year is very typical for producing severe weather. But maybe a little bit later arrival. We'll have to wait and see and keep everybody updated as we go.
Yeah, see how it all plays out. Now, of course, with a potentially active severe weather season ahead, or even if we weren't telling you there was a potentially active severe weather season, the best thing you can start doing is planning now. You don't want to wait for the tornado siren to go off to be like, oh my gosh, where do I go when this happens?
Yeah, exactly. Let's figure this out.
No, you need to make that plan ahead of time for sure. So meteorologist Julia Quady shares with us some things you should know coming into severe weather season.
All right.
Hey there guys, it's meteorologist Julia Quady. It's really important to understand the difference between a watch and a warning when it comes to severe weather awareness. So let's go over those differences very quickly. When it comes to a watch, it just typically means that the conditions are favorable for development when it comes to any type of severe weather event. And typically a watch is usually issued when it's around 6 hours in advance of that particular weather event. So to put it in more simple terms, it just means you have the ingredients necessary for that weather event to occur. It does not guarantee, it's just a possibility because all the type of atmospheric weather ingredients that you need for that weather event to happen are currently in place. Now, what's the difference between a watch and a warning? Well, a warning, that just means that the development is a bit more imminent or it's being observed to be happening at that given time. So you have the ingredients and the development is already happening for that weather event to occur, or it's occurring at that very moment in time. So typically an issued warning happens maybe a few minutes or even up to an hour in advance of that weather event. So it's really important again to understand the two differences between these two to make sure you're ready for any type of severe weather event.
Some great information there from Julia.
Very good, Julia. Yeah.
And I like what she was talking about with the watch means the ingredients are there.
Right.
But not necessarily that things are happening or that they are going to happen. The ingredients are just present.
Big difference.
Very big difference. So a watch means that you just need to be prepared.
Right.
You need to be paying attention to what's going on, but you don't
Right.
necessarily need to take action.
Right. Stay weather alert, stay weather aware.
Yes, but
What's
that's
going
the
on?
difference. When a warning is issued, that means you need to take action
Take
now.
action.
And that's the key difference between a watch and a warning is one means to be prepared to watch.
Yes.
And then the warning is go to your safe place now. So speaking of the safe place,
Yes.
this varies home by home, situation by situation, but let's kind of go over when folks are thinking ahead, talking to their families and making their
Yeah.
severe weather plans now,
Right.
where should they go when we have a warning issue?
Yeah, let's talk about that. So, as you said, Cassie, everybody's home is different. You know, if they have a rancher single story, you know, no upstairs. So, let's just talk about upstairs and downstairs. What do you think, folks? You want to be upstairs or you want to be downstairs? If you said downstairs, you're exactly right. Downstairs, as you go up, the winds get stronger and there's less support in a house or structure. There's more support downstairs. If you have a basement, let's just talk about the best place to go is a basement. Underground folks, some folks have storm shelters. So that's one of the best places to go. But downstairs versus upstairs. What about, do I want to be in a garage?
No.
No.
No,
I
you
wanna be
do
in a
not.
garage. How much, I'm not going to get a lot of support from
Yeah.
the walls and outside, right?
One of the first things to go is going to be that garage
The
door.
garage, exactly. It's weaker.
Yes.
So I probably want to go into the middle part, interior. You hear us say all the time, go to a small interior room in the
Yes.
middle part of your house, away from outer walls and windows, like a bathroom, hallway, or closet.
Yes.
And
So
we tell people you can get in the tub, just don't turn the water on. It's not time for bubble bath. But the pipes are anchored down the ground. So yes, that's one of the reasons we say get in the bathroom.
I mean, anybody who's seen the original Twister knows those pipes, they're going to hang. No, I'm just kidding. but in reality,
Well, that was impressive, wasn't it?
yeah, that
Everything
belt.
flying around.
Don't
but
do that.
They were safe.
They were safe. Don't do that.
Yeah, don't.
Along those lines with the bathroom, like you said, the plumbing helps to kind of
Yeah.
secure the wall
It
or just
anchors things down. Yeah.
yeah. So you want to put as many walls between you and the wind as you possibly can. This applies to a tornado or a severe thunderstorm.
Very good.
Because it's not just the wind and the strength of the structure that you're in.
Right.
There's often debris
Yeah.
being blown around in these storms.
Yes.
And we've all seen the pictures of 2x4s through a tree
Yeah.
or a toothpick going through a wall.
Yeah.
Because the power of that wind turns that debris into projectiles.
It's incredible. I mean, the irregular and strange damage that can occur. Now, I tell you, our good friend James Spann in Birmingham, Alabama, one of the things he recommends is for folks to get a helmet
Yes.
and go to your safe place to have a helmet. You know, a lot of times, you know, people may say it's like, really? Do I need to? To your point, Cassie, exactly. If it's a really serious storm, things are going to be flying around. Protecting your head is one of the best things you can do. We tell people to have blankets and pillows, and you can cover yourself, and that is very good thing to do as well. But having a protective helmet for kids, family, is not a bad idea.
No, and the reason we're having this discussion now
Right.
is because maybe whenever you watch this, it's the time to sit down with your family and go, where is our safe place?
Exactly.
Because by the time the watch is issued, you already should know this because
Right.
when the warning is issued, you got to go there.
Yeah, watch
So,
typically comes first.
not always, but mostly.
Not always, but most of the time it should. But then to your point, just to reiterate and hammer this home, the warning is
gotta go.
You got to go. That's where you take action.
But something to talk about along these lines,
Yeah.
which is always a difficult conversation to have. When we're talking about a safe place and we're having these discussions,
Right.
a place that's never a safe place during storms is a mobile home.
Yeah.
And I understand that is a home,
Right.
a manufactured home. The problem is the majority of manufactured and mobile homes are not properly secured to the ground.
Right.
There are straps that you can buy.
Right.
There are ways that you can upgrade your wind resistance and preparedness, but just how they come,
Right.
they are not safe places for severe storms and especially not for tornadoes.
Right.
They can roll
Yeah.
very, very easily. They can be displaced off of whatever they're sitting up on. There's room for the air to get under them, and that's what makes them so dangerous.
Exactly.
And typically they're not well reinforced with the walls either.
Right.
And so I know somebody at home is like, well, I live in a mobile home. What am I supposed to do?
Right.
If you have friends,
It's a very good question. What do I do?
but
Yeah.
now is the time to ask that question. So friends and family, if you have them in the area,
Exactly.
go hang out with them if
Right.
you can. You know, when that watch is issued or we know we have a higher than normal risk of severe storms,
Right.
try to go stay with friends and family. Some communities have a community storm shelter. That's
Yes.
something you would have to look into locally because we don't know all of those answers on that.
Right.
If you don't have friends and family or a place to go, you can go to a more sturdy and well-built building.
Right.
That may even be a gas station.
You know what? It may be.
Just somewhere.
Just you need to be in a more sturdy building or structure.
Because the majority of those fatalities that come from wind events and tornadoes are in mobile homes. And we have a lot of them here across the Southeast.
Yes.
And it's an unfortunate situation that your home is not a safe place to be during active weather, unfortunately.
Exactly. I mean, if you had a different types of homes, all different structures built, and the wind blows across that area uniformly, which ones are going to be most susceptible? It's going to be the mobile homes, unfortunately. So great information, because I think some mobile homes and trailer parks, sometimes if they hopefully can have a central, like you said, a community building, a sturdy, and may have to all cram in there, but that's a lot better in being in a safe place or surviving the storm than being in your susceptible structure.
And even let's go one step further than that, an RV. You're out camping.
Oh.
You have severe weather.
Been there. We're campers, and I think about that a lot.
Yes, and see, you think about that as a meteorologist. Someone coming in from out of town, there is some level of personal responsibility.
Right.
When you come into our area from out of town or you travel somewhere else, you've got to find a way to receive weather alerts where you go to.
You mean like going to our app, right on your phone?
We'll keep you up to date. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about
what's up next?
Impacts from severe storms.
Yes.
We talked about hail.
Right.
That the starting point for a severe thunderstorm is quarter-size hail. And you may look at that and say, that's not that big.
I know.
When that's coming at you at a high rate of speed, that's going to do some damage. And that's why quarter is the beginning size, because that's the size that is expected to begin causing some kind of damage. So
exactly. There's a rhyme and a reason. Let's just pick quarter. There's a reason.
Yes, through many studies that are actually still ongoing, which are fascinating, by the way, but I digress.
Right.
Mike Simon also has some fascinating information about hail and its impacts here in the East Tennessee area.
There are 3 reasons why a thunderstorm can become severe. And one of them is, of course, a tornado. Another one, it could have winds of greater than 58 miles an hour. And a third criteria, it could have hailstones the size of quarters. That's when a severe thunderstorm warning is issued. Now, there are all kinds of sizes of hailstones. The most common, pea size up to a quarter size. When it gets to a quarter size, that's when it is severe. That's 1 inch in diameter. But hail can get all the way up to grapefruit size. That's exceptionally rare, about 4.5 inches in diameter. Would you believe the largest hailstone ever recorded ended up being the size of a volleyball? That's about 8 inches in diameter, and it weighed nearly 2 pounds. Well, how can these large hailstones form the way they do in these thunderstorms? Well, you have intense updrafts within a storm. And what happens is it carries water droplets upward above the freezing level inside that thunderstorm. When it gets above the freezing level, it freezes into a hailstone. Well, then it's heavier, it drops. And if it gets down below the freezing level, water will coalesce on that stone. If the updraft is strong enough, it'll push it back up above the freezing level, refreezing it, and now it's larger. If the updraft is extremely strong, it'll repeat this cycle multiple times before the hailstone eventually overcomes the updraft and falls to the ground. Now, wind has to be extremely strong inside these storms for that to happen. Especially if you get up to grapefruit size, you need wind of almost 100 miles per hour to have them grow that big. Well, in turn, hail can fall to the ground just as fast, up to 100 miles per hour. And if it gets into a downdraft, it may be pushed to the ground even faster. This causes billions of dollars worth of damage each year. It kills thousands of animals here in the United States every year, crops about $1 billion worth of damage, and damages to our vehicle can be anywhere between $8 billion and $14 billion on any given year. That's why it's extremely important to warn about thunderstorms becoming severe due to large hail. I'm meteorologist Mike Simon, 10 News.
Some really great information from Mike Simon. And I can tell you, we have hail in East Tennessee.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yes.
And it can be very impactful.
Yeah.
But I lived out in Colorado. Holy smokes.
Big hail.
huge
hail.
Huge hail, and very frequent as well. So different parts of the country have different frequency and different impacts from the different hail sizes.
Yeah.
The odds of us having a volleyball size hailstone here in East Tennessee, because of the way our atmosphere is usually so warm, we tend to...
you took it up several notches.
Yeah, we get up to maybe baseball, softball size occasionally.
We can have ping pong ball.
Ping pong is common, more common here.
And that's severe. But yeah, I mean, it looks like it snowed.
Yes.
A lot of times out in the high plains in Colorado.
Yeah, because there's a high quantity of the hail as well. It's not just how big it is, it's how much of it falls from the sky. It is wild.
It is wild. Okay, so...
And lots of cars
covered all
balls.
the exactly, Cass. So we're covering all the basics. That was hail.
Damaging wind.
Damaging winds. Let's talk about it. There are different types of damaging winds. We've talked about what makes a storm severe, right? And that's 58 miles per hour winds or greater and 1 inch hail or larger, and of course a tornado. Let's get specific. So there are different types of damaging wind types. A microburst or an intense downburst. It is an intense localized downburst of wind typically from a severe thunderstorm. A supercell, or it could be an isolated severe storm. You can have a microburst. It's very localized, typically 2.5 miles or less in diameter. But here's the key. Look at that damage. It can be similar in some cases to an EF1 tornado with winds at or above 100 miles per hour. So that's a severe storm microburst. Straight line winds, this is the most common type of severe winds that we can see. That's typically from more of a linear or a line of severe thunderstorms. What are straight line winds? Powerful wind gusts that are moving out in one direction. That's a key term there, in one direction, fanning out. Just wind and water are very similar. If you take your hand through the water, that's kind of what wind does. It waves out and it pushes trees down, and damage from straight line winds can be similar to tornadoes with straight line winds. Derecho, what is that? Well, it's kind of like your upgrade to just your normal straight line winds. It is a more intense, widespread, long-lived, damaging windstorm with a wind damage swath of at or greater than 240 miles. So it's kind of a criteria of a very long-lived, damaging windstorm, a derecho, Cass.
And what you did when you just walked through that was the size of the damage zone.
Exactly.
Starting with microbursts, going to straight line winds, and then speaking to the derecho.
Localized and then expanding out much greater distance.
Impacts-wise, they're all the same.
Yes.
They're wind that is creating some form of damage.
Right.
And I know that our wind damage risk actually kind of varies depending on time of year.
Right.
Because right now, while we don't have a lot of leaves on the trees,
good point.
you can have a 40 mile per hour wind gust and it doesn't really do anything.
Right.
But in the summer, when we have our beautiful big bushy trees, they are like
leafed
sails.
It's different.
Yeah, they just catch that wind and you can have a much more of an impact from a lower wind gust.
Great point. Big difference in time of years with vegetation.
And what we always tell people, because it'll get really windy around here, and people will be like, I heard the freight train, which, by the way, is not the woo-woo part of the freight train.
It's not Dollywood freight train.
It's not the horn.
Yeah.
It's the what it sounds like when...
That was very good, by the way. Yeah.
Thank you. I also practiced that. It's the branches kind of rubbing together.
Yeah. And producing that roaring sound.
That's that friction, that roar coming through.
Right.
And people will hear that, and they're like, it had to have been a tornado.
Yeah.
Because that's what we all heard growing up, too.
And a lot of folks, if they have a lot of damage, they almost want it to be a tornado because, boy, I know what happened. Well, it doesn't have to be a tornado. It could be severe straight line wind. If you got a roar, it could be severe and produce damage, whether it was a tornado or severe storm.
And regardless, it impacted you. So we want folks to be safe, regardless of whether...
That's what we do. You see our banner right there. It says weather impact. That's the main thing that we try to convey is what are the impacts, regardless of what type of storm it was.
So let's kind of break down the science a little bit behind microburst.
Right.
Because this is the small scale version of what you were talking about. This is the kind of impact that can impact like a subdivision.
Right.
And so when we're forecasting storms, obviously we cannot say your subdivision will get it, yours will not. And these happen so fast on such a small scale, they are very, very difficult to warn for.
Right.
So how do they form here?
Yeah. So here's what we got going on. This is a nice graphic, by the way. We got dry air that's coming in that helps to produce more instability. You've got moisture that's coming up in the updraft part of the thunderstorm. This is like a maturing, developing storm. That leads to evaporational cooling. Now, when you have evaporational cooling, you're going to have the weight of the air with that cold, dense air. It's growing, it's maturing, everything's building up, and then when it starts to collapse, that cold air is going to fall and accelerate and descend, and that's what's going to produce this microburst, this intense downward momentum of potentially destructive winds. I mean, Cass, look at that at the bottom there. Look at those winds that can come out of a severe storm, up to 150 miles per hour over a couple of miles.
It's literally like a ball of cold air falling out of the sky.
Point. Yes.
Because when the evaporative process, evaporation,
right,
requires heat from its environment.
Right.
So it sucks the heat from the environment, it cools the environment around it.
And then it's going to release it.
Yeah, and then cold air is more dense than the warm air, so it's going to start to fall.
Yeah.
And as it continues to have more and more of that temperature difference, as it gets into the warmer and warmer air down, it continues to accelerate, and it pushes all the other air out of the way below it. We have seen videos of these happening, and that's exactly what it looks like. You're looking at a storm, and all of a sudden it just looks like the bottom of the storm falls out, and when it hits the ground, it just spreads out.
Yeah.
And if you're under that, it will make a mess.
It will make a mess. I mean, that's impressive. That's a very good graphic, actually, to illustrate that. So that was a microburst.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about the straight. Now here's a very impressive shelf cloud. You may see this on social media. Don't get too close to storm, but people like to take shelfies. Anyway, that was just a total side note. But this is a shelf cloud, intense winds. Now, this is one example of a long-lived derecho that was producing a long history, a long swath of some damage and winds over a long period of time. But this shelf cloud, what it says in and of itself, it's big flag racing. You've got Arcus roll cloud. You can see that. You've got the gust front. You've got the intense, the darker clouds underneath. That's the very heavy rainfall. You got that downward momentum of cold, dense air that's coming down. So intense, damaging winds is what a shelf cloud is indicating.
And a shelf cloud itself is not dangerous.
Right.
Because people will see this and they're like, oh my gosh, it's the mothership.
It's the mothership. Yeah, they see that on it.
Take shelter now.
Yeah.
This can also happen with non-severe storms.
Right.
But essentially what it's giving you an idea of is that cooler air is about to come rushing in.
Oh, yeah.
Potentially some very heavy rain, and obviously gusty winds will accumulate.
Yeah.
Accompany is the word I'm looking for. Accompany
this would be the time to, maybe snap a quick picture.
Go inside.
And send it to newstips@WBIR.com, but then move inside your safe place immediately and send it after you're in your safe place.
Now, derecho is one of those words that, you know,
Yes.
how sometimes catches. And so derecho is something that people like to be like, yeah, but was it a derecho?
Yeah.
There are very
It used to be
specific.
called deer echo a long time ago, and then we all figured out derecho.
Derecho.
Anyway, just a side note.
So this event has very specific criteria, as you were mentioning.
Right.
And so an actual derecho does occur here in East Tennessee occasionally. When we
Right.
look at this climatology, it can be every 2 years to every 4 years, but that
Right.
also means you can have multiples in 1 year.
Right.
You know, but they do tend to occur a little bit further to the north of us and also to the west of us based on the climatology.
Right.
But we like to look at this and talk about northwest flow.
Oh, yep, northwest flow. And it's typically going to be when you have a hot ridge in the plain states, storms form on the top of that ridge and then roll down like a bowling ball.
Yep. The ridge riders.
Ridge riders. And here's what's fascinating. Let's look at this graphic. Over 70% of derechos, which again are a long-lived damaging windstorm over 240 miles. Hundreds of miles. Thank you, guys. Exactly. Look at where they occur. Warm season. Clearly from coming out of April, but May, June, and July. Over 70% in the warm season. So that's a clue that it's after your main severe weather season in spring, but it can be in summertime. That's when you can transition to some of these damaging wind events. That's very impactful for much of the country.
All right, so now let's talk about tornadoes.
Let's talk about
because
tornadoes.
I know that's what folks want to know. So here
Yeah.
is a look at the map of tornadoes by county since reliable records have been kept beginning in 1950, and they include up to this point in this year.
So, quite a few things stand out here, right?
Yeah, the red definitely catches my eye.
Right.
Cumberland and Fentress counties,
Right.
and down in
Northern
McMinn.
Plateau and McMinn.
In McMinn County, and as well as Monroe County there too. So the reason why those counties have the brighter shades of color and consequently the higher numbers, that's what that coincides with,
Right.
is because typically our weather systems come in from the west
Right.
or they come up from the southwest.
The mouth of the valley in the southern valley is
Mm-hmm.
wider than the central and northern valley. It's open to those strong, intense winds.
Yes.
Exactly. It's interesting, Ray and Megs. but it just so happens McMinn and Monroe, Southern Valley. And that's a great point, Cass, coming in from the west, the plateau. I mean, look at that. You're like, wait a minute, that's a barrier. But by definition, plateau, it's flatter on top.
Yes.
So the plateau takes the brunt of our storms in East Tennessee a lot of times. And those storms hit that plateau, and it's relatively flat, even in parts of Morgan, Scott County. Tornadoes are disrupted by mountains and hills more. They break up more. But where it's flat, like the Plain States, where they are most frequent, Tornado Alley and Dixie Alley, that's where they can be sustained. So it's interesting on the plateau that they can maintain their strength and be more frequent because it's relatively flatter. And they typically see the more intense storms.
Well, if I had filled out the entire state of Tennessee with the graphic,
yes,
you would see that West and Middle Tennessee by far have more tornadoes than we do.
Yes.
They tend to have more severe weather, and the storms are more intense. But obviously, we still have it here in East Tennessee, and that's always what makes our forecast so difficult.
Right.
Will it or won't it weaken?
Right.
That's always the big question about when the storm systems are coming into our area, and that's also part of the thing with the plateau is they just take the brunt of it because that's where it's coming from.
It's fascinating. The plateau really helps us. If we did not have the plateau, we'd be like Nashville.
We'd have more here in the valley.
Oh, it'll be here in an hour. There's nothing to disrupt it. Let's see what happens. Margie Eisen used to say, well, Todd, when the weather hits the plateau, then a lot of times it'll scoot on off to the north. When it's coming up the valley, bat down the hatches. Look at this map. That kind of verifies, and that could be for all different types of weather, but West and Middle Tennessee are flatter. They don't have those barriers. They take the brunt of the storms. The plateau, thankfully for us here in the valley in East Tennessee, the Cumberland Plateau takes the brunt of the storms for us.
And I don't have the data for our southeast Kentucky counties.
Right.
On here too, but obviously tornadoes do happen up in southeast Kentucky as well, as we just witnessed, unfortunately,
in London.
last May.
Yeah.
So speaking of tornadoes, let's talk about by month.
This is clear.
I mean,
look how clear this is.
I do want to add a big asterisk onto April.
Okay.
We had the April 27th, 2011 super outbreak.
Yeah, worst outbreak. Yep.
And then we also had the April 1974 super outbreak as well.
The previous worst outbreak. The two biggest outbreaks, April.
Yes. Exactly. So that skewed the number a little bit. But talking to the gentleman at the National Weather Service, Brandon Wasilewski, he said even if you take those two outbreaks out, April is still our most likely tornado month.
That's a great point.
But remember that with the situation that we have with the La Nina transition this year, that might delay that onset. That's what we saw last year. We had the two tornadoes in February, but then it wasn't really until later in April and more into May that we had the active weather here.
Yeah, your conditions are the ingredients are going to be much more prevalent in these months. So to your point, if it is a little delayed, you still have a decent number. Of course, there's March, but May. Yeah. And even into June.
Even into June, we have had tornadoes in every month of the year.
Yep.
Across some part of our viewing area. And I want to also point out the October, November little pop that you see with the numbers right there.
Yeah.
We do tend to have a secondary severe weather season in the fall season as we start to get those cold fronts coming down.
Yep.
We did not have that this year, thankfully. But some years we do. So that's where that little boost comes from.
Absolutely.
It is important to mention that a lot of the tornadoes in our viewing area tend to be relatively weak.
Okay.
The Saffir-Simpson, not
which is good
Saffir-Simpson
news.
scale, excuse me, the enhanced Fujita. I went straight to hurricanes.
Yeah.
Excuse me, the enhanced Fujita scale.
It's okay. I say fajita when I'm hungry, so it's all good.
Is how we...
Thank you, Tom. You like that? Yeah, it's time to eat.
It's a damage rating scale.
Yep.
So that's another key factor here when we talk about tornadoes.
Right.
We have seen an increase in the number of tornado reports because of social media.
That's a great point.
Because of people living in more rural areas now.
Right.
Because just 25, 30 years ago,
you wouldn't have heard about it.
It's kind of like if a tree falls in the woods and there was no sound, or it doesn't make a sound. If no one was around to see it, it doesn't make a sound.
I'm going to say it still does, but that's a side note. Go ahead.
It's a thought. That is another discussion for another time.
Discussion. That's right.
The idea is that while we have seen an increase in tornado numbers, that doesn't necessarily mean that the number of tornadoes has increased.
Right.
It just means we've been able to report them. Because we've even had some tornadoes where we know that there was a tornado on the ground here in East Tennessee, and the National Weather Service cannot reach the area because it's in the middle of a forest.
It's just rural and just no damage to structures or anything like that, and couldn't reach it, and
it doesn't get counted. And that also counts for the rating scale as well. If it doesn't hit anything, if it just goes across a grass field,
Right.
it's impossible to tell exactly how strong that tornado was.
Exactly.
So that's where you have some of the unknown numbers
Right.
on the right over there. And anyway, so all that to say, our tornadoes by rating do tend to be on the weaker side here in East Tennessee.
Right.
EF0, EF1, those are up to 110 miles per hour.
Right.
We can have stronger though, up to EF2, 111 to 135 miles per hour. And this goes back to our mention of mobile homes. Most mobile homes are not rated to withstand winds like that.
Right. It's a damage intensity scale based on the structures and the materials used to,
Yes.
and how they're impacted. So, yeah.
Now-
Great point, Cass.
And now let's talk about time of day.
Okay.
So this graphic shows you by the hour when the tornadoes have been reported.
Right.
So notice that the majority of them happen between about 2 and 9 p.m.
Right.
Now remember, our spring severe weather season tends to be when the majority of these tornadoes happen. So let's say the sunset is by 7:30, 8 o'clock.
Right.
So you've got a lot of these tornadoes that do happen going through the evening hours as folks are trying to get home or have just gotten home. Maybe they're eating dinner, fixing dinner, trying to put the kids to bed. They're distracted.
Exactly. Doing other things at this time of day or evening.
Yes, they're distracted, but they're awake.
Yeah.
And so that's the
That's
majority of them happening. Also notice though, at 11 p.m. to about 2 a.m. on this graphic, there's another little spike in the numbers right there. We do have a high number of nocturnal tornadoes in our part of the country.
Yes.
And so that makes them all that much more dangerous. I talked to Brandon Wasilewski about that. And he was essentially, we were talking about the climatology. How, why?
Right.
Why does that happen?
Right.
And it's because just the way that weather systems move across our country and the way they
Right.
develop and just the geographical features. You've got the plains.
Right.
You've got the cold air coming in from the northwest off the Rockies.
Right.
You've got the warm, muggy air coming in off of the Gulf of Mexico.
Yep.
Or the Gulf. And then they
Right.
start to merge right there. And that's where the storm systems tend to develop,
Right.
kind of in the Mississippi River Valley or a little bit west of there.
Right.
And during the day, you have more fuel. You have more instability. That's why West and Middle Tennessee have that higher number of tornadoes and tend to see more severe weather than we do.
That's it. And it's usually in the afternoons. We're watching it to our west.
Yes, we are.
And it typically gets here late in the day or in the evening. And it's a trade-off. But, a lot of times tornadoes and severe storms at night, they're harder, to see. So it's kind of like,
Yeah.
In the plain states, it's like, oh, good news, I can see a tornado coming. Well, bad news, I can see a tornado coming. It's during the daytime, but
Yeah.
when it's at night, it's harder to detect. So this says a lot about, yes, as you said, the nocturnal nature of tornadoes.
And to that point, when you said see them coming, that rung a little bell to me too.
Yeah.
We don't storm chase here in the Southeast.
No.
And the reason we don't do that is because our big bushy trees, our
Right.
beautiful rolling hills, both of those things reduce your visibility, your
Right.
ability to see off into the distance
Right.
and tell if something that's coming from the clouds is actually reaching the ground. We also have such abundant moisture here.
Right.
We call them high precipitation supercells.
Yes.
And what that means is that most of our tornadoes are rain wrapped.
Right.
Some of them you're going to see
Right.
because that's just the way they work out. But the majority of them are going to be inside of the rain shaft.
Right.
So unlike when you're out in the plains and you can see this tornado 50 miles away
Yeah,
because
exactly.
it's flat as a pancake and there's
Exactly.
no rain,
Right.
that's not the case here. So that's why we don't storm chase here.
Not at all. And that's what makes it dangerous.
Yes.
You can't see it. That's why you really got to take action when there's a tornado warning. Yeah.
Yes. When a tornado warning is issued, we always say don't pass go,
Right.
don't go look outside,
Right.
and don't phone a friend. Go straight to your safe place
That's a
right
good
then.
point. Right.
And then after that point, you can phone your friend and be like, hey, just want to make sure you know there's a warning been issued, but make sure you protect yourself and your family first
Yeah.
when a tornado warning is issued. And actually,
Yeah.
let's talk about ways to protect yourself and
Let's
get those
do it.
alerts and warnings.
We're going to wrap this up, and let's talk about that.
So meteorologist Julia Quady shares the many ways that you can receive those weather alerts and notifications.
Hey there guys, it's meteorologist Julia Quady. So when it comes to understanding any type of severe weather awareness, you need to make sure you know multiple ways to make sure you can get weather alerts in case of a severe weather event. So here are a couple tips of type of ways you can make sure you're locked in to get those different type of weather alerts, especially when severe weather is happening. One, of course, simple way that we're all familiar with is local TV and radio. So being tuned in, of course, to us here at WBIR for your weather team to give you all the updates on what you need to know in your forecast. That's one simple simple way to do that. Also, talking to your friends and family, just being aware overall the forecast and communicating that with folks in your community. That's another step you can take to be on top of your weather forecast. Also, you can have a handy NOAA weather radio, and that gives you the ability to be tapped into the closest weather office near you to your community, and you'll get the latest updates nonstop on your forecast in your area with the NOAA weather radio. Also, you want to make sure on your smartphone you have the wireless emergency alerts turned on your phone. So those are usually what can sometimes go off at random and give you latest updates and a really loud beeping sound on your phone. And of course, you can get weather updates and more severe cases in that way. And of course, you can also use social media in the internet to get your weather alerts as well. Now, one caveat to that is just you want to make sure that you're getting it from trusted sources. Like, of course, us here at WBIR, your weather team, we have a Facebook page where we regularly put out posts to let you know about your forecast and about anything going on weather-wise here in East Tennessee. You can trust us to give you that valuable and important weather information, but you don't want to just use social media as a whole and trust any given source when it comes to your forecast. Hey there, guys. Meteorologist Julia.
Okay, 3, 2, 1. And another good point that Julia just made right there, trusted sources. We, over the years, appreciate social media because it increases our reach and it increases our ability to interact with our viewers, answer questions, receive storm reports. But
those are all the good things about social media.
Those are the positives. It also does create a lot of misinformation or opportunities for misinformation because there are some people who like to post severe weather outlooks a week in advance, big headlines, look out, this could be the worst tornado outbreak we've seen since April 27, 2011.
Yeah.
And then we get there and there's a thunderstorm and everybody comes back at us and gets mad because they're like, you said, no,
they group us all together.
Yeah.
And they forget where they saw it.
Yes.
Yeah, we believe in the meteorological community, we as meteorologists, we do not like on social media when people put out that misinformation because it does a disservice to, first of all, people and false information. And we want folks to have trust in your local meteorologist. And we're trying to do the best we can, keep everybody safe. But exactly, Cass, there's so much misinformation. So trust your source. We've all seen it.
Yes.
And if you look at the motivation behind that, and actually it's a technical thing, actually a lot of times they're doing that to actually, this is going to be a shocker, there's money involved.
Yes.
The more clicks, it's monetized.
Yes.
And they get you, so just a heads up, not just for weather, this is other social media stuff.
Be careful.
Be careful. Don't click on it. Trust your sources. Yeah.
That's right. And we do our best to give an early heads up. And that's always the balance, right?
Right.
Giving the early heads up when we don't necessarily have all the details and all the information, and also being responsible with the information that's being shared along the way as well. Never withholding information, but making sure that it's a conversation, right? Communication is a two-way street.
Right.
We can share the forecast all we want, but if folks are not looking for it, they're not checking the forecast, they're not going to receive it, because the one service we do not provide is coming to your own front door and knocking on it to let you know. But we are on every other platform. Yeah. So folks need to be checking.
We're 24/7, but we're not quite to the,
personalized knocking on the door. So we want folks to, first and foremost, check back for updates.
Yes. Just
check in daily. No chance for storms today. Enjoy your day. Have a good day.
Yeah.
Check back tomorrow. Oh, 3 days from now, they're saying there might be a chance for some strong storms. Right. Check back the next morning.
Check back. It could change.
It could change.
It may not stay the same. Now, that's another forecasting thing.
Yes.
We would love for the forecast to, issue it, and then 5 days later, it stayed exactly the same. Reality check, that does not happen. It's typically going to morph and change something. So check back for updates. And yes, there is something that you have to do. Each person has to have responsibility to stay up to date, to stay informed. So,
and we do our best here at WBIR to just be transparent, open, honest, explain what we know, but also be transparent about what we don't, where the certainties are, where the uncertainties are, and let's be realistic. There's never really a certainty when it comes to the weather.
Yes.
But that's why we're spending the time today having this conversation, because we want folks to be prepared either way.
Either way.
Be prepared, not scared. We want you to be ready as we start to have more thunderstorms over the coming months here in East Tennessee.
Casting all Excellent information. Thanks to all of our Channel 10 weather team. Tom Barclay, thank you so much for putting this together. And folks, if you enjoyed this, share this with your family, friends, and so everybody's kept safe. And this is going to continue to be on streaming. You can watch it anytime. And we hope that you got a lot of valuable information. I've enjoyed it, Cass.
Yeah, this has been fun. I like this room. We should do this again.
I like this room. Tom, this is great. Y'all got a great setup here. But so that will wrap up this 2026 severe weather outlook. And we hope you stay safe this severe weather season.